Hello, friends. This is your friend Kent C. Dodds, and I am super excited to be joined by my friend Sandrina. And I didn't ask how to pronounce your last name. Is it Pereira? Pereira.
Okay, I'll give it one more shot. No?
Okay, so it's Pereira. Pereira.
No. Sandrina Pereira.
Pereira. Yeah.
See,
Okay,
easier.
that's good. I'm sorry. I do try to say people's last or names correctly, and I'm not always good at that. So anyway, I'm super excited to have you on. Thank you for coming. So
Thank you.
Sandrina and I met. I'm. You know what? I feel like we had some interactions on Twitter, but my latest memory or my oldest memory of interacting with you was through the KCD Discord when you started doing meetups that were accessibility focused. Am I wrong there? Did we've talked on Twitter before though? I think.
Yes, we did. I think the first time we were like in the same room together was in one of your workshops,
Mm.
React Performance. Yeah, I signed up for one of those. So I think
Oh,
that
great.
was the first time, a long time ago.
Yeah, you seemed super familiar to me when you started interacting on the KCD community on Discord. And so, yeah, it was such a pleasure to see you start using the meetups feature. Not a whole lot of people do that. And like it takes a little bit of bravery, especially for what you do for the meetups, is actually giving presentations, which is really cool. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit more, but I don't want to get too far into that before we get to know who you are. So,
Mm.
could you introduce yourself to our friends?
Yeah, so my name is Sandrina. Um, I live in Portugal. Portugal is a small country with like tasteful food, amazing weather. If you want day you want to visit Portugal, I'll be here around.
Awesome.
Uh, I'm a front-end engineer for like 6 years now. I think the place where I learned the most and I grew the most as an engineer was at Farfetch. Like it's an international company where I learn a lot about React, large code bases, design systems, accessibility as well. And yeah, right now I'm a lead front end engineer at Remote, working remotely, living the good life. Besides that, one of the things I like the most there is that it gives me the freedom to share with the community, like sharing stuff about accessibility or CSS or anything. And yeah, that's me, very
That's great.
briefly.
I guess that that's one thing that the rest of us love about your company too, is that you're able to share so much
Yeah.
good stuff. So, um, Sandrina, you have given I think 3 presentations, maybe 4, as part of a meetup on the KCD Discord, and you're starting to move into Twitch so that your meetups can be recorded and people can watch it later, and more people can participate. Those who aren't in the Discord. I'd love to hear a little bit about what motivated you to try the meetups feature, and kind of what's driving your desire to share what you know about accessibility.
Mm. So I consider myself a self-taught engineer, and so I think with experience, it's like I feel like I need to share back to give back to the community. So from all these years, I was like, okay, how can I give back to the community? I tried tons of things, articles, blogs, speaking, and now I'm with the meetups, and it's going well, and workshops, and I think what's my main focus now is accessibility, right? And why accessibility? When I start learning about front end, one of my teachers, like, he taught me about HTML and CSS, and even before JavaScript, he taught me about accessibility. And I was like, okay, cool. When I build something, I need to make sure it works for everyone, even people different from me. But when I start being a front end engineer, like in the real world, I start realizing that people were not aware of accessibility. And I was like, okay, this is a gap and this is something that I want to share. So the lack of awareness from the people around me, I think it was my main motivation to talk about accessibility. I think
Hmm.
I think that was my main driven, and it has been my my main reason for that.
Yeah, yeah, and um, I actually quick question.
Go for it.
Is for accessibility, why do you think that that people are or that web applications struggle to be accessible? Is it because people just aren't aware, or is there like a actual skill that people need to develop beyond just awareness?
I think the main issue is awareness. I think people don't know. It's not because they don't care about it, or there is a lack of interest. I think it's a lack of awareness. Like if you use a keyboard, if you use a mouse and you type with a keyboard and you can see the website, you just build something in your own image. So you don't think about people that use something different from you. So that's why people are not aware of accessibility or aware of how other people use the internet. I think that's only why. The
Hmm.
same way, like when you build like for Chrome and you just think about Chrome, but then you need to think about all the other browsers. So people are aware of the other browsers, but maybe people are not aware that there are people that only use the keyboard, or people that use screen readers to access the internet. So I think that's it. It's the lack of awareness of people different from you that use the internet.
Yeah, I think in general that causes a lot of problems beyond accessibility. Like you said, the lack of experience that other people have. Like if you just have a bunch of adults who don't have children building playground equipment or something like that. I don't know. Like they may not be best equipped to do that. And so having some more diversity on the team can really improve your product because you have people with different lived experiences. And short of that, you need to have a lot of self awareness and recognizing that your lived experience is different from others.
Yes, I think at the end of the day, it's just to trying to put yourself in others people's shoes, or even to ask people different from you to try on whatever you are building, and only then you can truly build something that is accessible and inclusive.
Yeah, and it can be difficult to find people that are willing or able or have the time or um, or that you can pay to try your stuff. And so the short of that, you can use the tools that they use and try to limit yourself in the same way that they are limited, and just try to walk in their shoes, so to speak. Um, so yeah, what about like so there's some of the simple accessibility things like make sure you have labels on your inputs and stuff like that, but there are some more complicated user interfaces that people are trying to build, like that are not built into the web platform,
Mhm.
and so therefore maybe accessible or screen readers don't have built-in support for whatever component you're trying to build. For example, like a date picker or a tabs UI or different things like that. Are these the sorts of things that people just need to be aware of, and then they'll build them as accessible components, or are there specific um, resources and skills that people need to know about to be able to build accessible user interfaces with those sorts of components?
Yeah, that's the tricky part about the web. It's like for me, web is still a baby where we have like headings and paragraphs and inputs. But nowadays, the web is way more than that. It's like date
Mm,
pickers and models and tabs and things that hide and show, toggles. And when it comes to that, it's awesome if you can do it yourself, but sometimes it's so tricky to do it properly and to test it and to make sure that it works as expected. That maybe my advice is like to try to use something that already exists, packages from the community. For example, if you are building a model, think twice, because building an accessible model is harder than it seems.
mm,
So try to use something from the community, like a package that is like agnostic, like JavaScript vanilla. Or if you are with React, there is this rich UI library that has a lot of built-in components. There is nothing wrong with using packages from the community, because if you use them properly, you already know that the accessibility is covered up on that part. Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I would never build my own modal now that I have Reach UI and in particular, there are other component libraries, but I'm a huge fan of Reach UI. They do a phenomenal job of testing. So let's say that that you need to build your own something like
Mhm.
some component. There's nothing out there that is going to work for you. What are some of the and let's just take a modal as an example. What are some of the resources and tools that you use to make that accessible? Like how do you know when it's like for me, if I'm just using it, it's like, yeah, I can use this. Like, how do I know that people who are not like me will be able to use this as well? What do I need to be thinking about? What do I check?
Hmm. So maybe to start with, you should be aware of some type of people that use the internet differently from you. For example, there are people that only use a keyboard. So first thing, try to drop your mouse and just try to open, navigate, and close the modal only with a keyboard. If you do that, that's already a big step.
Hmm.
Then, if you want to go further regarding a modal, for people that use only a screen reader, for example, blind people that can't see the website, they use screen readers. Screen readers are like this assistive technology that reads the page for you. So try to use a screen reader and see if the model is announced properly when it's open and when it's closed. Um, and even when you interact with the model, try to interact with the model in a buzz. When the buzz is like shaking and you struggle to close that model, make sure that the button is big enough to close the model, for example. It's just trying to think about different use cases from you. It's
Yeah,
not a bulletproof solution, and it depends from component to component. uh, but yeah, it's all about trying to do it differently from what you are used to do.
I think that's a great principle in general. That so thank you for that, and it makes me think of end-to-end tests. Basically, that's kind of what in a similar way. When we're talking about testing, we want to make our tests resemble the way the software is used, and we automate it so that it can be scalable, right? But for for accessibility, it's very difficult to automate accessibility testing. In some ways, it's impossible. At least with our current. By the time that it's possible to automate all accessibility testing, then all of our software will be written by computers anyway. So that's we don't need to. Uh, don't wait for that. But yeah, it just kind of makes me think. Okay, let's think about how our users are actually using the software and use it that way and just see if it's possible. And I really like your example of using it on a bus. Like that's not a sort of thing that we typically would think about. Or try to use your software while you're holding a baby, or like
Yes.
just however people are going to end up using your software. See if you can improve their experience, and I think that's important.
Yeah, and you touch an important part about automating tests. Is like at the moment only like 30-40% of accessibility issues can be catched with automated tools. And it's like you are using a machine to cover a human behavior, so it's kind
Mhm.
of tricky. So you really need to know how to do it and how people deal with internet. Accessibility is about people. So you can't put a machine there to say, okay, this is 100% accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying that, it made me also think about how accessibility is more than just about people who cannot see or can't use the mouse or whatever the case may be. It's actually about making your site accessible, like with regard to the payload size or like the size of your application. If somebody's on a spotty network, how useful or accessible is your application to those people? So there's a lot to think about when we're thinking about accessibility. Is there any other things that we should be keeping in mind when we're thinking about making sure users have a good experience with our websites?
Hmm. So maybe I would like to bring up a myth about accessibility. And I think one of the biggest myths about accessibility a few years ago might be, oh, accessibility is only for blind people. But I think the biggest myth at the moment is a disability is a health problem.
Hmm.
And a disability is not a health problem, it can be uh, a temporary problem or ephemeral. Like, there is a spectrum in disability, the type of disabilities that you have. And it's like it can be a permanent disability, like being blind, or it can be a situational um, disability, like for example, you are on the bus and you are struggling to close that model, you are having a motor disability at that moment. Or it can be
Hmm.
just like temporary, like you broke an arm and now you can only use the keyboard. So I think that's something that people should be aware is like disability, it can happen to anyone, even you, because you might have some type of disability at some point in your life. So
Hmm.
it's only not only about the other people, but it can also be about your future self, you know? So I think that's something
Hmm.
that people should be aware of, that
Yeah,
disability
absolutely.
affects everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important point as well. So we talked a little bit about interaction and like how disabilities impact our ability to interact with a web application. What about the visual side of things? So maybe the people who are using our website can see perfectly fine, like their vision is fine, but whether it be, or sorry, their motor skills are perfectly fine, and they can see the screen, but maybe there's a situation that's kind of impacting how well they can see your website or something. What are some of the visual things that we need to take into consideration when we're building web apps?
Mm. Okay, so maybe the first thing is when you use color in your website, that you use color in a way that is not the only way to communicate something. For example, imagine that you have a checklist of stuff that is done or undone. Don't use only like black or gray to differentiate both types. Like, try to use visual elements like icons or text or explicit text, or try to use a secondary element besides color. I think that would be one thing. Actually, that's one of the criteria of WCAG.
Hmm.
For those who don't know, WCAG is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Is this set of guidelines, and one of the guidelines says that you cannot use color as the only way to express something. And actually, that's like level one of the basic accessibility guidelines to follow, and you cannot automate that. There is no
Hmm.
tool to automate like the color was the only way that you used here. Like, that's something that you need to do it manually.
Hmm.
um, Another thing about color is like contrast. Make sure the contrast respects the ratio. There are a lot of tools out there, and that's one of the things that can be automated most of the times to detect color contrast. Um, Regarding color, I'll say those are like the main ones. Use
Hmm.
color as a secondary thing, not a primary or only thing. And when you use it like with good contrast.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that really is a matter of awareness. Like, there's no real skill involved with displaying more than just a color, and I think most of us have probably experienced the situation where you've got a checkbox and you're not sure which state the checked state is. It's like, is it checked when it's filled in, or is it checked when it's like empty? Like, I'm not sure which is yes and which is no in this situation.
Oh,
So
I
yeah,
I feel that a lot with toggle buttons. Like, imagine like an icon with like a speaker and says like mute, and I'm like, okay, is this muted or not muted? Is it
yeah,
or not? So you
yeah,
need
exactly.
something
Is
else.
is that button showing me the current state, or is it showing the state that it will be if I check it?
Yes.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm using Zencastr, or we're talking through Zencastr, and we have this mute unmute button. And
Mm-hmm.
when I hover over it, it gives me a little title, which is good. Like, you should have, when you have icons, if that's all you're going to have, that's okay, so long as the icon is really descriptive and you get some sort of title thing that pops up and tells you what. what it means. However, this button only shows a microphone, and I don't know whether that is the current state or the state of what will be if I click on it. And I have learned through experience that it's displaying what the current state is. But yeah, there needs to be some sort of indication, especially for new users or just people in general, of what the current state is and what this how the state will change. And that can be maybe sometimes a difficult thing to do. I'm not sure how I would change this Zencaster mute unmute button to make that better, but yeah,
Yeah, and
maybe save.
that's not an accessibility issue. That's kind of a usability issue, you know?
Mm,
Like it might be accessible if it has like all the content to not only visually but not programmatically but semantically speaking that it says that whatever the action of this button is like through a visually hidden element or a class or area label or something like that. But besides that, uh, you need to make sure that it makes sense for everyone who's using it. So it's an usability issue.
yeah, that's true. This button could perhaps be just as accessible to everybody because of the technologies that they use. But now we have a secondary issue that's impacting everybody else, and that's usability.
Yeah.
So when developers get accessibility bugs, or maybe they're not labeled as bugs, but when people get accessibility issues that come onto their plate, how should they be thinking about those?
Hmm. Accessibility issues. So if you find uh, something that has some accessibility issue and you create a task for it, I think my tip would be to not label that task as an enhancement or an improvement. Accessibility is not an enhancement. Accessibility is a requirement, you know? So mark that task as a bug. If it's not working for someone, is a bug, you know? So try to look at your backlog or your current tasks and change that category field, you know, and mark
Yeah.
that as a bug. So you need to prioritize that because if you fix that, you are making someone's life much better out there.
Mm. Yeah, and you know what's interesting too is for some people this particular bug might end up costing the company a lot of money in lawsuit fees if it's not fixed. I think about Domino's maybe a year or two ago had
Hmm.
a big kerfuffle around accessibility of their website, and I think they decided to do something stupid and settle for $3 million or something rather than fix their website, which is like, I mean, I'll fix your website for 250,000 if you
Exactly.
want.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's just outrageous. But you can get nailed by for not making your website accessible. So yeah, I would say it's a bug, and it's probably high priority to be fixed bug when you
And
get an
probably it's an
accessibility
easy
issue.
bug to fix, you know, most of
Uh-huh.
the bugs are easy, most of it. If it's not that easy, try to look for the community solutions and reuse something that already exists. If it's hard to make an accessible model, just go and reach some library out there.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think most web apps are I mean, I'm not gonna say they're trivial because there are components that are difficult to make accessible. Absolutely. It takes a special skill set, and you gotta learn that. But for most problems that most applications face, it's pretty simple. And like you said earlier, it takes awareness. Sometimes, though, there are differences in the technologies that people are using that need to be taken into account. I think about like a few years ago, we had all the browser wars, and it was just really difficult to support all the browsers. Now that has settled down quite a bit, and it's pretty easy most of the time to support all the browsers. But I have experienced different screen readers and assistive technologies, and they behave pretty differently. Have you had some trouble with that? And how do you address the cross compatibility issues with the different assistive technologies?
Yeah, that's a tricky part. So, VoiceOver is like the screen reader for Mac. So I have a Mac, so I only use VoiceOver. I don't have the ability to use another type of screen readers. But
Hmm.
one thing that I really like is like uh, maybe people that are listening or reading this might be aware of can I use for CSS features, there is this website called ALE Support. So A11Y support.com. I think it's .com. Uh, .io, sorry, .io. So there is this website called support.io where it's like, can I use, but for screen reader supports. And basically, it's a huge list of all the area attributes and how they work with in different screen readers. So when I'm in doubt with something, I go for this and I take this as my source of truth. Might be not 100% accurate, but it helps me a lot with that.
Yeah, that's actually really helpful. Thank you for sharing that because I recently was working on a form and in preparing an updated version of Epic React, I'm going to include a special section on accessibility. I eventually plan on making an entire workshop on accessibility, but I wanted to at least teach a single lesson on accessibility just to give a quick intro before, so that people have that until I make a full workshop. And I was really struggling because one thing that I've noticed is that screen readers seem to they kind of follow the ARIA spec, but then they also try to compensate for developers' lack of following the ARIA spec. So they try to do a little bit of extra work, which kind of counteracts what we're trying to do when we follow the ARIA spec. And so like I noticed when I was typing in this input, I would have an ARIA live region over here, and it would tell the user that the form is invalid now or whatever. And it would start reading that, and then it would stop reading that and read what the user just typed. And I'm like, I can't get it to like read what I want it to read. Do you run into problems like that, and how do you deal with those sorts of issues?
Yes, so I can speak as a true screen reader user because I don't use screen reader on the daily basis, so I don't know as much. Like I know like 5% compared to a real screen reader person. I know like 5% of what a person that uses screen reader on daily life they know, you know.
Hmm.
So for me, it's like when I face one of those issues where like the screen reader is announcing something and then it jumps to another thing and maybe messed up with some shortcut, is like I keep in mind that most of the people who use screen readers, they listen the screen reader like 4 5 times the speed of what I and you listen to a screen reader. So it's like they will navigate the web page way faster than we do when we are like moving around. So it's like maybe they will be okay, but when I'm in doubt, I always ask the community, like
Hmm.
Twitter, a tweet, people. I have a question here. I just send a tweet asking for feedback. Once again, I try to put not I not only put myself on others people's shoes, but I also ask the real users here, look, how do you deal with this? What are you expecting? You know, because I don't know the answers for that. And that's one of the beauties about accessibility, is like you need to look for the solutions and to be mindful about the current solutions and the choice that you make, and that there are trade-offs, and maybe there isn't a perfect solution, but if you are aware of the, the trade-offs and the current solutions, you'll get the best solution that is out there currently.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think basically it's all about finding a balance and look for what the community wants or needs the most.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And if it's for like a work project, maybe you can convince your manager to hire somebody or at least contract with somebody who has that lived experience of using these technologies because it is yeah, it's tricky. Kind of my approach has been similar, where I reach out to the community, maybe find somebody who can I can contract with, but in general, it's just try to follow the ARIA spec as best you can, and, and hope that the screen readers deal with that well. So, Sandrina, this has just been a pleasure to chat with you. I'd love to chat more, but we're down to the end of our time, and we do have some homework for folks. So, this one actually is It's kind of fun. You get to choose. But you have to do at least one. You can do all of them if you like, but here are the things that you need to choose between. So, and in all of these or all of these, it's when you're using the app that you're working on for work or whatever app you want to improve the accessibility on. So first, try to disable all the CSS. And we didn't talk about this too much, but why would it be useful for people to disable CSS on their website?
So this is like a workaround if you are scared of using a screen reader as a first try. So the screen reader, the way a screen reader announces the content is about interpreting the HTML, right? So if you write semantic HTML, the screen reader will announce it properly. So if you disable the CSS and if the page still makes sense visually, so probably you are on a right path to create an accessible website. So that's an easy way to double check if your website makes sense, if those headings are there, if the buttons are real buttons and not spans, if the list is really a list and not like a bunch of spans again and divs. So disabling the CSS kind of unmasks the beauty of your website and puts the semantics on test, you know?
Yeah, that's great. Good. So that's your first option, disable CSS. The next is use your app in the sunlight. That can help you with the contrast issues we talked about earlier. The third option is use your app with the keyboard only. So put the mouse in the drawer or whatever. Try to use your app with only the keyboard. That will reveal a lot about, and like try to open your modals and close your modals, all of that. And then the last one, this is for the masters of you out there, or the more brave, which is all of you, of course. Use your app blindfolded with a screen reader. So that will probably require that you use it only with the keyboard as well. But yeah, those are your four options. Definitely give at least one of those a try, and maybe all four of them. Do you have anything to add, Sandrina?
Um, Not at the moment. Maybe one last tip is to remember to put yourself on other people's shoes. Be open to listen to other people, to try different things, and don't be scared with accessibility. With enough practice, you'll get there. And if you are already aware of it, it's already a good start. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you. What's the best place for people to keep up with what you're doing?
At the moment, I'm very, very present at Twitter, so you can just follow me there. A_Sandrina_P. I'll be there. Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. Hey, thanks so much. And we'll see you all in the future. Goodbye.
Bye bye.